Welcome to day 2 of the Formlabs User Summit. My name is Jaku Sneeman, and I'm a practical prosthetics designer. I work in the film industry, and my company is called Dreamsmith Studio. I've put together a short presentation to go over some of the effects that we've designed using the Form 3L machines to help us print molds. Here is a breakdown of the whole process from start to finish. I've got a couple of pictures to show, and I'll talk through the process as we go. Um, these are 3D scans of an actress for which we had to make a prosthetic prop where it looks like she was killed and hanging from her neck. It's all quite gross, which is why they get us to make prosthetic versions of the actors instead of putting them in harnesses and all kinds of crazy things. So we started with a 3D scan of the actress on the left, which completely replaces the need for live casting, which is quite an invasive process where people get covered with silicone and plaster bandages. And the 3D scanning also makes the whole process a lot faster. Since we work straight from the 3D scans and get the pieces printed out or machined that we need to work with. So from the 3D scan on the left, I retopologized it to change the pose a bit and to make it look like she's hanging. I resculpted the anatomy by the neck to make it look like it's broken with all the weight hanging in the body. And then I split it up on the right into manufacturable pieces. Here is a close-up of the final detail that I added to the face. I went through a design phase from which the director chose the level of gore, because not only was she hanging from her neck, but part of her face was removed. The nice thing about this workflow is that you use the 3D scan for the design process, and it's also there half done when you need to manufacture it after your design's approved. So from this sculpture on the right, I designed the digital mold, and it's split into pieces that can be printed straight onto the Form 3L. Here is the body mostly assembled with the manufactured pieces all together. And here's a close-up of the silicone straight out of the 3D printed mold. We intrinsically painted the mold with colored silicones to get the shades for the fatty layers in the skin and the skull and the gums and the teeth. And then from there, we add detail, facial hair, and all the extra colors that's needed. Here are the 3D molds right after they printed, and then right after we've cast the silicone in there. It's such a cool process, and opening a mold is always kind of like receiving a gift, because you can't wait to actually open it. And this was just amazing to actually see the texture from the 3D printed mold was incredible. It completely transfers all the skin details and skin pore textures, and with the ease that this was manufactured, this made the whole process really fun to do. Here are some gory close-up pictures of the painted prop. This was before we added all the blood and dirt. So we can see where the eyeballs go, and we added a few more nurnies for gore hanging out the cheeks, and it had an amazing hair application and eyelashes. It's pretty gross how the one slice goes straight through the eyelid, and you can see the eyeball underneath. This was a really fun thing to build, and I've actually got the ZBrush file that I can show you after this little picture presentation. The next thing we can go over is the biomechanical skeleton. In in Raised by Wolves Season 2, there is a new android called Grandmother. And when she's discovered, she's just a pile of weird looking bones. And the father android then assembles them and they start growing and turns into a skeleton, which looks kind of human, but is definitely not human. So we sculpted this really strange looking skeleton um, based on the brief, and went through a couple of design changes, and basically based the design on the fact that we can print the skeleton instead of having to manufacture it through the traditional means. I can't actually think of how we would have made this without 3D printing it. All these weird shapes and organic geometric designs and all of that to make molds with inner cores and all of that would have just been impossible. So this actually happened quite quickly. We have quite a few machines and shared the workload. And I think the whole thing printed in about 5 or 6 days. And the cool thing is, while they're printing, you can carry on with other work. And you don't need a team of mold makers to do these things anymore. You can basically line it all up and print it and spend more time on refining it. Here's a breakdown of the skeleton on the left and the pieces that it's split into for manufacturing, and then the synthetic muscle layer on top, which basically grew from the bones when father added the android blood. Here's a close-up of the face with the golden skeleton and muscle structure. Some more of the designs. Close-up of the skull. We added the school pearlescent finish to it, which picked up really nicely on the lights on set. Here's some more work on the designs. And here's a picture of father putting some of the android blood onto the body as it's growing. Here's a close-up of some strange plants and flowers and berries growing on a skeleton to show that it's a living thing. The berries on top is actually print straight from the 3D printer as well, printed in clear resin, and they are hollow with some paint poured on the inside, so it looks like a multi-layer thing. And the cool thing with that is that the clear resin is UV reactive. So we're shining some UV lights on there to make it look like they're slightly glowing. Here's the another thing that we did, which is a mask that the young android girl wears. This was quite a tricky thing to figure out because we needed something that's both mechanical, kind of medical looking, and still organic enough to move around. And we had this idea to base it on some of the tech that was used in season 1 of Raised by Wolves, and came up with this silicone type of mask that folds out of a little ball. And it was based on a 3D scan of the actress, and we 3D printed the mold and cast the silicon straight into it, and ended up with this really cool looking mask. The turnaround on this was super fast as well. I think we did the whole thing in less than a week. Um, so it's a really fun build. On the right, you can see how the prints for the whole mask fit onto one session on the build plate, which is incredible. It's we made an outer shell and then split the inside of the mold into 3 pieces, which is collapsible to get the silicon out once you've cast it. Here are some of the designs with color options. So as I said earlier, the nice thing about this workflow is once you've made the mask or whatever you're building for your design, it's pretty much ready for manufacturing. You just build your mold on top, which is explained in this picture, we basically inflate the 3D sculpture to make a thicker shell, and then boolean the sculpture out of the shell, and then add little holes for the screws and prying points and supports, and obviously a pour hole. Some more pictures of the prints, and there's a close-up of the final mask. The next thing on the presentation is a picture of a dummy that we built of the mother character for Raised by Wolves. In the story, when they discover her at the beginning of the season, she's offline, and they take her back to the lab and cut open her stomach to see if they can fix her, because obviously that's how you fix androids. And they wanted us to build a dummy of a duplicate dummy of the actress. So we got her in for a scan and scanned her in a lying down position, split the head off, and that actually fit onto one build on the Form 3L, and we printed it with the fast resin in one evening. Came back the next morning, and the head was ready to go. The rest of the body was machined, and it was all stuck together, and with the gray silicone suit finishing it. So it was super easy to build compared to how we would have had to do it traditionally. And so what you see in these pictures are actually just the 3D print that's got a really cool paint job on it and some hair glued on. Luckily, she was really dirty in the shot, so we could get away with making it really dirty. And I'm sure that helps, but yeah, it worked out really easy. Here's another close-up picture and a picture of the process. So here's a breakdown of the actual body. We scanned her in her silver latex suit, and then carved the piece out of the belly for the liquid and the technician's hands to go into, and then basically just split the body up like you would with a mannequin. I hollowed the head out, so and I added a couple of supports on the inside to print it out as hollow shell, which really helps for speeding up big prints. Here are pictures of Paul's bio attack. This poor guy has a mouse in the story, and the mouse was infected with a disease, which he then spread onto Paul, who broke out with all these weird scaly growths and basically turned into a cocoon. So instead of 3D printing the whole thing, we thought it'd be cool to just make texture tiles, which we then cast into silicon and basically glued over the manufactured shape of the actor in the fetal position. So this was quite fun to do because we didn't have to make a big sculpture and make a big mold. It was basically just a manufacturing job. And with the articulated body shape on the inside, the whole thing moved really well. And we had to weigh it down. Some more pictures. We had to put some weights in it here and there to get it to move naturally. And we also had a air rig on the inside, which could separate the chest pieces, which made it look like it's still breathing. Here are pictures of how we split the body apart, and basically just connected all the pieces with rope. It just allows it to keep the body shape and move around a little bit. And here are all the steps we for manufacturing the scales on the shell. Basically just covered the body shape with tin foil and cloth, and then glued on the silicon textures. Here are the designs Um, Same as earlier, I scanned the actor and based all the designs on the actual actor. And once they were approved, it was all ready to go. I used the same scale textures in the designs that we actually 3D printed. So you we're able to actually very closely manufacture what we render as the design. Here's a close-up render, and there's the final stage of the cocoon. There's a couple of stages from Paul turning into the cocoon, where we basically made sheets of the texture on bolt cap plastic, and it was we had an amazing on-set crew uh, that did a great job of applying all these prosthetics. Here's an earlier stage, and here's Paul getting carried out of the cave. This poor guy also got some of the black scabs, and he fell over and screamed a lot in the back of the shot. Uh, Here's a shot where they're trying to fix Paul, and they dipped him into a vat of liquid. So we had to add weight to the body on the inside to make it sink into the tank. And here's Mother carrying him around. This little guy is Paul's poor little mouse. Uh, we we made this little mouse mostly as a reference for VFX, but I was still trying to figure out how to do the digital molds. So I've got the ZBrush file that I can show you after this presentation, just to quickly go over how this was manufactured. So basically, it was sculpted in 3D. I made the digital mold, printed the mold out, and we cast the silicone into the mold, and then added the hair to the silicone and painted it to look all gory like this. So it's not a real mouse, it's completely synthetic. Um, Here is a shot of some figurines that I made of the characters for Race Wolves. Some lucky people got these as promotional gifts after the show, and I believe some of the actors got a few of them. But unfortunately, the show was cancelled, so it didn't go much further than this. But they were super fun to make on the Form 3L. Uh, we were basically they were mostly printed out in manageable pieces, assembled, and lots of fun to make. So we've also been experimenting with making traditional prosthetics digitally, and here are some of our early tests. On our most recent project, we actually managed to get it working 100%. I'm not allowed to share it yet, but hopefully at next year's summit, I'll be able to give a presentation on the prosthetic appliances. I think this is the end of my presentation. Let me see if I can go over to ZBrush, and we can go over some of the files, and I'll show you a quick workflow. See, there we go. There we go. I hope you can all see that. This is a 3D sculpture of Paul's little mouse. We made a couple of stunt mice for Paul to walk around with, so he didn't have to have the real mouse with him all the time. And this was obviously still just a normal mouse. And then I made the sculpture of the exploded mouse when it turns into the bioweapon. So the idea was that he bursts open and releases spores, which Paul then inhales and turns into the scabby pouch. So from the 3D sculpture, I'll show you a quick workflow of how we did the mold. Um, you basically isolate the piece you want to mold, all these pieces were printed separately, just in probably rigid resin that was painted and used on the final mouse. And here is the body of the mouse, all in one gross little chunk, which I then inflated. I think I made a 3mm shell. And here are the cut lines of the mold. So these are basically just planes that I wrap around the shapes to help me decide where to put the mold separations. It's a difficult thing to explain, but if you are used to traditional mold making, this would probably make more sense. So from there, I added dynamic plane to it, so you can make a wall thickness. And then I have a enlarged inflated body of the same shape, which I then Boolean to cut the mold walls to a manageable size. From there, I split the mold up. I add little holes for screws, and then you end up with a mold that kind of looks like this. So these pieces are then all separate with the detail of the mouse on the inside or whatever you're molding. And these chunks of mold can then print perfectly on the Form 3L. We tried all kinds of resins, but we found that the rigid resins work really well. I'll show you the whole mold. And there's the whole thing. So over here, I've got the file of Decima's hanging corpse, just to show you the process. Over here is my design file. And working from a scan of the actress, I was able to go through a couple of quick variations of the gore levels that the director was after. First, he was thinking maybe her whole face should be gone, but then he thought maybe we should still recognize her, so we put some of her face back. But once this was approved, we mostly had everything we needed to actually manufacture the prosthetic. So here's the working file. From the design through to the scan and the final sculpture. So once you'll see little rods sticking out of the eyeballs. This is basically to locate where the eyeballs will be staring at, and it makes a cavity in the final mold for us to place the eyeballs in there. So from the final sculpture, I decided where I would like to split the mold. I have a square which shows me what the build size is for the Form 3L. So I would pull it into the scene and hold it over the chunks to kind of see how big I can make them to fit into the Form 3L printer while I'm splitting it. It just helps with the whole process. And after that, after you've built your split lines, You need to make an inner core, which is this guy, which basically gives you your skin thickness for your silicon. So I did a few things here. I made it attachable to the body, which I'll show you here. So the inner core attaches to the body through these holes. Which then allows for the negative space of the silicon to fill up the rest. So then what I did, because we only need to make one of these, was I made the inner core so that it will stay inside the mold once the silicon is cast. That in itself saved so much time because we didn't have to mold the inner core or cast it in anything else. It was straight off the printer into the mold. We cast the silicon and take it out, paint it, and stick it onto the body. It was really cool. Here is some more of the molding process. Let's see. Inner core. And this is how the inner core was split up for manufacturing. So that's about it from me. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation. Apologies for the gore, but it's part of the job. Please reach out if you have any questions, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. I think I'm going to be on one of the panels if anybody has questions then. Otherwise, I'll see you all soon.
Thanks for the fantastic presentation, Jaco, although it was a little bit gruesome sometimes. It's a pleasure to have you as a speaker at our User Summit for a second year in a row. And I only have one question for you. When we have this conversation next year, what do you think would have changed in the industry overall or in your workflow? Maybe what are you expecting from the industry and from 3D printing to change within the next year?
I think that the process is going to be streamlined even more. And once more people start adapting this process, we're going to be able to do a lot more. We're going to be able to do a lot more in less time, which is sometimes a problem because you just end up working harder. So we have to. I think we're going to just be able to refine this process. I wish I could share with you some of the things that we've done on my most recent project, but we'll see when that's available.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, and have a good day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.